Welcome back to Behind the Barricade. I'm Jim Christian. We're a couple of weeks into something a little different on this show. Instead of guest interviews, we're stepping back and pulling at the threads that keep running across the first 12 episodes. And Chad Cannon, who I've known for 10 years and who has helped shape this whole podcast, is the one turning the tables and interviewing me. Today's conversation is one that's close to my heart: relationships over transactions, partner versus vendor. We'll get into why the contract should sit on the relationship, not the other way around, why trust gets built in small moments, and how fast it can erode if we're not paying attention. And the opening we did a few weeks back, where people who had walked the site days earlier couldn't believe what they were seeing, and why none of that happens without trust. If you've ever felt the pull to treat the people you work with as just another line item, this one's for you. Now, on to the episode.
Hello, and welcome back to the Behind the Barricade podcast. I'm Chad Cannon. I get to take a little break from our normal kind of routine and get to interview Jim. And as we take some time just to kind of reflect back on, we're 12 episodes into Behind the Barricade, some of the themes that have come out, I said, hey, let's take some time and just like walk through some of these like big themes that feel like almost every episode hit them, if not every, probably 80 or 90% of them. And so this week, as I teased out kind of in the last episode, of the ones that we're doing, I think this one's I'm most excited about, because I've seen Jim embody this over the last decade that I've met him, is really the importance of relationships. The theme that we're calling it is relationships over transactions, and this idea of partner versus vendor. And I think sometimes in business, we get into vendor relationships and we lose the relationship, and then ultimately lose this like idea of partnership, and that we're in this together. And one of the things that I've just loved over the years is business owners that really do value relationships and see their clients, see their customers, whatever you want to call them, as partners. They win in the long run way more than anyone else. And I've seen Jim and the team at Cornerstone embody this. And so it's really fun that I get to not only just in your professional life, but see it in your personal life. We're gonna jump primarily into professional here, and even some of the lessons we've learned from others. But maybe even just share, actually, before we go into the professional, personal, why is this even important to you? This idea of relationships over transactions. Where did this even come into play for you to say, hey, I'm going to embody this in Cornerstone and what we do with our clients?
Yeah, I didn't see that question coming, Chad. So, yeah. I think for me, it really is who we are. It's more than just the transaction for me. It's can we impact our clients and our team and our project partners and ultimately the world by having a business that's based on solid footings, solid relationships. And yeah, we don't get it perfect every day. We can fumble the ball for sure. But the spirit behind that is life has lots of challenges. And whether it's in business or in our personal lives, to have relationships that you can lean on professionally, personally, however you want to do that, that can get you through the twists and turns, the ups and downs of whatever it is in building a project or whatever that happens to be, is just, to me, the way I'm wired. That we have this core value, thoughtful compassion, just treat others the way we wanted to be treated. And we that's how we just live into that as best we can. Life's too short to always be arguing and scrambling and fighting for the dollar. Let's find a way to add value and relationships in a positive way so that this makes getting up easier.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Trust is built in very small moments, right? How do you build the trust in that small moment? What are the ways that your team embodies building trust kind of in these small moments?
Well, I think you got to do what you say you're going to do. And if you can't do that, you got to tell the person that you're not doing it and why you're not. Just basic integrity that this is what I'm committed to and this is what I did, or this pivot has happened and I got to change. I think it is one of those small moments. You build trust in these small moments so that whenever there's a bigger challenge, the relationship's solid. I think of a few years ago, we had a new client, and it was a bit complicated on how we got into the client, but we had these weekly calls, and the client was based in Boston. So I flew down to Boston every week to sit in their boardroom and around the table to have that call and have, a little bit of FaceTime with them to kind of help build that trust. We're here, we're not going
Hmm.
anywhere. We're here to support you. We're here to support the projects that we're working on. And these little small moments of just having impact and having integrity in those moments is really how it's built.
Yep. It's good. Yeah. Just look back at podcast. I remember Jim McNally sharing he had noticed something from the superintendent, which was a pretty quiet person. He went all the way to the other side of the job site and was like, "Hey, this is the cleanest site I'd ever seen," and just kind of thanked him and or her. And really, he said, "Hey, that one conversation opened up a 3-year relationship." And so I think we could all look back in our own personal or professional lives, like those little small acts of kindness that built this trust, that trust then created this like really long tail relationship. And I just got to do this and this, that we lose sight of the relationship and we'll potentially, I've never done this, but things don't go well, fly off the handle, say things you don't mean. And then you got to go back and ask for forgiveness and all of that. And how, like, so it's coming up with the idea of like how quickly you can erode trust, but how long it can be to build trust, right? And so this like importance of not trying to erode trust, but build trust. Talk a little bit about that, like especially the construction world. I mean, my dad was a iron worker. I would say trust was not high on those job sites. It was every man for himself, it felt like. Very rarely could a general foreman manage the team and the subs to have everyone rowing in the same direction. Construction, I would say, is probably a hard place to do that. So, how do you guys show up and do that?
I think it's showing up in the right moments and making deposits into that trust account, right? Because
Hmm.
there's always going to be withdrawals from the trust account, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes things will happen, but you have to take it. You got to be putting deposits into that bank account of trust, whether that be on the site between the trades guys or at higher levels, whatever level that's at. You just got to be adding value, means trust into their account. I think Charles said it well about his grandfather, that he was building these relationships around his engineering firm. And that's how trust is built. That's how you get a
Hmm.
relationship that lasts. It's not necessarily easy, but it's really not that hard either.
Hmm.
If you got some integrity, that you're just making these little deposits. I think it just comes to being clear in the communication. Brené Brown has this line, clarity is kindness. Relationships, just being honest with them and giving them the clarity that they need. And I think part of that is giving everybody a vision of what you're trying to do. What is the end? The old story about the guys, the masons building a cathedral, and one guy asked
Hmm.
one bricklayer, "What are you doing?" I'm a bricklayer, but the next guy says, "Well, I'm building a cathedral." It's just that.
Hmm.
How do you get that instilled in
Hmm.
people? Let them see that vision, and that allows you to get some trust with them, I think.
Yeah. So I'm curious, your company's grown over the years. You've got how many people on your team now?
About 25, yeah.
Yeah, 20 plus people. In the early days, it was probably real easy to build trust because it's just who you were, right? You were
Mm.
involved in every project. You're not involved in every project now, in some capacity, but you're not on the ground. You've got the team that's doing it. How do you at Cornerstone ensure that your team who's working with these clients play this out? How do you ensure they embody this like, hey, our clients are partners, they're not vendors. Trust is super important. And so when this idea, even what you just talked about, clarity is kindness. So this idea of like disagreements are going to happen. We're going to not always agree, but
Right.
ambiguity creates a big, big gap, right? So how do you try to ensure that that is played out from, the vision from where you're at as the owner all the way down to the people that are working on the project on a day-to-day basis?
You have to realize that shepherding culture is a full-time job, and you're always building culture or you're eroding culture, and by what you do and
Hmm.
say and how we act as. So just from a practical point of view, we're every month when we have our all team meeting, we're talking about team members that have lived out our core values. This
Hmm.
is somebody or teams of people that have lived out core values and what it's meant, or how did they create a better journey, and just
Hmm.
living to that. The core values, yes, are on our wall, but more importantly, they have to be in how we behave, how we act, how we treat people. And we've just got to continue to reinforce that, right? That you're living
Hmm.
into these core values and living them out and what you do and say. So it can leak,
Hmm.
but as long as you're kind of on it and paying attention to it, you just kind of work through it. It's part of our recruiting.
Hmm.
We're sharing this in the recruiting. So if somebody has any big issues with it, we've had some people that we thought we hired the right person, but
Hmm.
reality is we didn't. So, they're no longer with us. But that ability to always be living into it and identifying where there's issues, if they're not living into it, or celebrating when there is, and that clarity
Hmm.
is kindness, right? How do we do it?
Totally.
And one real practical thing that we often pay attention to is, from a project partner point of view, is if we have an issue on a site and it involves a project partner, our mandate is never to throw that partner under the bus in front of the
Hmm.
client, at least without not letting them know that we have to send that email or we have to have that communication. Hey,
Hmm.
well, you got this issue. We've been talking about it, but we're to a point that we need to bring the client in on it. So heads up, this is what's going to happen, because that's relationship building, partnership with them, but also partnership with the client. So you've just got to
Totally.
balance all that.
Yeah, as you kind of teased into where I was going to go next, this idea of like partner versus vendor, right? Which you just shared. You would have never done that if you would have treated the people you're working with as vendors. Or even, I think sometimes, I think it's important too, like you could easily be your company and what you do, the service you provide as a vendor, right? And you really want to be as a partner. Speak a little bit about how you would define a partner versus a vendor and why it's important that everyone is seen as partners and not just vendors.
Yeah. Well, I think as a partner, people means you're along with them for the ride, whether it's us and the owner or us and our trades, however that works, that we're in it together. If you're just strictly a vendor, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the way it's going to roll out. That
Hmm.
we get into situations where having a relationship with depth can solve a problem that could be expensive but isn't, because you've got the depth of that relationship. You can make
Hmm.
that last minute call and say, hey, we need this, we need that, or we can react to it in a different way because there's a relationship. There's deposits in that account that says, okay,
Hmm.
let's all rise up. Let's all rise up. Doesn't mean we don't have contracts. It doesn't mean all that, but contracts rest on the relationship, right? That the
Hmm.
relationship isn't built on the contract. The contract sits on the relationship and represents the terms of how that interact, commercial conditions of that are to be executed. But if you get into a relationship that basis of the relationship is the contract, the cards soon fall quick, or can fall quickly. Doesn't necessarily have to be, but it's just that reality that you want to be able to make those calls and say, hey, I need your help. I need this problem solved. I need this to move forward,
Hmm.
whatever those situations are.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Even like the example you shared where it was like, hey, there's a partner on the job that dropped the ball, whatever, and you're having to go communicate upstream. If you're seeing them as a vendor, you're not going to, you're just going to easily to throw them under the bus, make yourself look better. And what's that going to do down the road? Are they going to want to help you fix it? Are they going
Yeah.
to want to work with you in the future? Are they going to want to give you favorable terms? Are they going to want, all the, depending on who that is. And I know people cut corners, right? Just that like human nature is to do that, especially in high performing places that expect great achievement. It's easy to do. I think it's just, I've seen it's human instinct. And so what we're talking about, I feel, is countercultural, especially in the construction space. And I think it's what separates you and Cornerstone so well, and this deep idea of like, part of this, I know you've talked about is like connection is why we're here, right? When we say why we're here, business, because like the partnership idea is like we want to succeed so you can succeed, and ultimately it's like commercially, it's like, hey, if we succeed, you succeed. The next project, hopefully we succeed, you succeed. And there's a domino effect to that, right? But talk to me maybe commercially, personally, what connection, why it's so important to you, why this is like a hill you're willing to die on, that at the end of the day, you're like, and I know I've seen it time and time again, you will make decisions that cost you money if you feel like it's going to affect a relationship negatively because you stuck to your word.
I think it's kind of the basis of the win-win idea that everybody's got to win. Everybody's got to win. If it's a lose-win or a win-lose, it just doesn't work. It's not sustainable.
Mhm.
Everyone has to make some money along the way to
Mhm.
support what needs to happen in the business. So it's not a bad word. Everybody is allowed to make some profit, but it's just important to me to have relationships that appreciate and understand that, so that as the twists and turns of the project happen, we all have a sense of that, okay, this is an unforeseen condition and there's no way nobody could have known that. And we have to solve it. It's to get to the end, we have to solve this problem. And sometimes we say, you got to pay for what you get, right? If there's something that's happened that nobody's seen, nobody understood, yeah, unfortunately, that has to be paid for. But
Mhm.
it's just the way the relationships have to be built, that they're on that ground. I was thinking of Adam Hirsch when he was on the podcast talking about the time that they invest in identifying the partners that they want on a project to ensure that there is alignment. That takes time. It takes
Mhm.
energy, and it may mean that the price isn't the lowest, but with the goal of the successful project, it's what's right. It's what's right for the relationship. It's what's right for the project. So yeah, I don't even want to think about the time we paid for things for the benefit of the relationship. You know, that just is what we do. That's what we have to do. You know, don't want to make a habit of it, but you have to do it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, this is touching on, Jim Collins' book, Good to Great. Now, you've talked about this, is that one of the things that he deduced was these executives that ignited kind of the transformation from good to great, the case studies that he saw in that book. It wasn't about figuring out where to drive the bus and then get the people to take it there. The thing was, how do they first get the right people on the bus? So, talk a little bit about that as far as like when you guys are involved early, how you can help this project succeed by getting people on the bus early and how that builds trust as well because they're involved early on.
Yeah, I think you got to get the right people on the right seat on the right bus, if you want to call it that. And if you don't, this sideways energy starts to create itself, right? And becomes
Mm-hmm.
a distraction to what we're trying to achieve. Going back to being involved earlier, then you're able to identify the right partner for the right location, whatever the right
Mm-hmm.
requirements are, and you get them on the bus. And let them do what they need to do to drive that bus. Oftentimes, once we get into construction, one of the key people that drives the buses is the site superintendent. So making sure you have the right site superintendent to drive the bus through construction is critical. But everybody plays a
Mm-hmm.
role. Everybody, from the
Mm-hmm.
owner through the architect, engineers, the contractors, the subtrades, everybody's on that bus. And we've all been on party buses,
Yeah.
and they can be fun.
I don't know. I've never been on a party bus, Jim. This is a lifestyle I don't know about. No,
Oh,
I'm just
well,
kidding.
then we need to go on one. Let's do that. That's a good goal for us, is to go
Yeah.
on a party bus. But
I do live in Nashville. There are a dime a dozen here.
yeah, exactly. I've never been on a party bus in Nashville, however, so that could be a good goal. But the reality is, not all of our buses are party buses, and
Mm-hmm.
we got to have fun on our bus, but we also got to get to the destination. So you got to make sure you got the right people in the right seats, moving the bus forward. Sometimes it's different people driving at different times, depending on where you are in the project cycle. And that's a really good thing to realize, that role does change. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it's one person in the project driving the bus for a certain period of time, but then they have to let go and let somebody else drive, because now we're in that cycle of the project. But that's where the trust comes in. that you can let go of the steering wheel and let somebody else take the bus because you have confidence in them, you have trust in them, you have this relationship that says, hey, now it's time for this person in this role to drive the bus because we have that relationship and not always jerking the wheel. I think I was reading a book the other day and I talked about when a pilot takes off the plane, it's not that it just takes off and goes it's constantly making adjustments, right? It's
Hmm.
constantly,
Yeah.
okay, where am I at? Well, I got to go up, got to go to a higher altitude. I got to go down. But that's the key. When you have trust in your team, you know that these adjustments can be made with different drivers of the bus because they know this is where we are in the journey and this is the person that's driving it. And this is little adjustments that need to be made along the way. But
Yeah.
it's all built on that
Totally.
trust.
Yeah, it reminds me, you've been there, the In-Town Golf Club, which is a indoor golf
Yes.
kind of simulator, pretty high end. When you saw the construction of it, I mean, they spent quite a bit of money on it. And I have good friends basically worked at the GC, and this was a project he was overseeing. He oversaw superintendents, kind of like they're one of the biggest here in Nashville. And I told him, I was just joking with them. I'm like, they're saying this is going to be open August 1st last year. There's no way this is going to be open August 1st. There's just no way possible. And he's like, oh no, he's like, we're going to beat the timeline. And I'm like, what do
Wow.
you mean? Yeah, he was just like so dang confident. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like this never happens in construction. And he said, because I know who the superintendent is and I trust him and I know what he's built over the years. And time again, he's delivered. And sure enough, they delivered 3 weeks early on this
Wow.
project. And blew everyone away. And it was just like, and he had no doubt. It wasn't just this like saying it because I value my people. And I just think, it was just like there was no doubt that he was going to do it. And again, that was years and years of trust building, right? Like
Yeah.
the guy was a great leader and he was good at his job. He was good by himself, but he had to have a team. Like he built a team that he trusted. How many subs did he have to manage through that process and all of it? I think it's important. I think another theme that came out was this like great vision without great people is irrelevant, right? There was this vision to build this thing, have it ready by August 1st, imagining people coming in and hitting golf balls, but commuting, hanging out, business happening. None of that would have happened without the great people that actually did the work, right? And
Absolutely.
so walk through kind of what that means to you is like, as Cornerstone, you get to kind of be this bearer of someone's vision and you get to come alongside and support them to have this come to life and be part of ribbon cutting and that experience. And when you do that and how you reflect back to how a project gets done, I'd love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's great fun to bring somebody's vision to life for whatever they have in store. I was just at an opening a few weeks ago at a client that had a really, really aggressive timeline, extremely aggressive timeline. And they had people from multiple levels of government there, 50, 60, 70 people at the opening. And what was very interesting for me was people that were there that had been there like a week or two before, and even just a few days before, were saying, we can't believe it. We can't believe what's been achieved here. We can't believe what you've done. But that was only achieved through relationships and the trust in those relationships, the
Mm-hmm.
trust between us and the owner, the architects and the team there, but also the trust between us and the trades that were on the site to be able to say, okay, we need to get this done. We need to execute it. And the depth of the relationships allowed that to happen. And
Mm-hmm.
it was exciting to see that. It's exciting to be able to release that. We just opened a store in New York a few weeks ago. It was a bear of a job. Alex on our team was in New York for 2 weeks getting it to the finish line, but he was there for the opening and to be able to see it come to fruition, the vision. And I think it's true. He said in a call the other day, he said, I think this is the closest execution of, because when a project gets started, there's a kind of an overall design rendering. This is, I think, the closest project that I've ever had where the rendering is achieved in the construction. Like,
Wow.
oftentimes there's
Yeah.
too many obstacles to get
Changes.
that
Yeah.
fully
Yeah.
achieved. So the
Yeah.
ability to do that was awesome.
Incredible. I know that's been a bear of a project. When we met last fall, Alex was just starting that project or I think he was pretty involved in it at that point.
Yeah.
I'm curious, how many relationships do you think he had to manage on that one project alone over the last 6 to 9 months, if you had to guess?
Dozens.
Dozens. So,
Yeah.
wow, the
Multiple,
importance of relationships.
multiple, multiple people in the owner, multiple people in the design team, multiple people in the contracting side, general contractors, subtrades. Yeah, this was interesting. Multiple people. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Dozens. Yeah,
yeah,
dozens of
yeah, yeah.
people.
That just shows you the importance of trust and relationships because you're working, you got dozens of relationships you're managing. That trust, you get that bank account has to be built up because you can't micromanage that on a daily basis, right? Like there's got to be clarity. That's why the pre-construction we talked about last episode is super important. Then we
Yeah.
can, we bring the right people to the table at the right time. We can trust those relationships. And then the next episode we're going to jump into is communication, right?
Mhm.
Communication is key to moving things forward, key to continuing. We touched on communication a little bit. We're going to do a deeper dive into how communication can make or break a project, or maybe not break a project, but it can break the profitability, the enjoyment of the project, the timeline of the project. I mean, the project's still going to happen,
Yeah.
but it may not happen the way that we want it to, or all the partners involved. So first off, I want to say it's been a joy to see you build relationships over the years, unintentionally our own relationship, but I see the way you do that in work with your employees, with people, and you embody it. And so I'm honored that I get to be part of,
Mhm.
some of Cornerstone's story in that because I see
Yeah.
this in you and am excited to see Cornerstone to continue to grow and embody that over the next 10, 20, 30 years beyond you because it's a foundation you've built. It says a
Yeah.
lot
Well,
about you.
appreciate our relationship, buddy.
Yeah. Well, next week, we're going to dive into communication. And if you're wrestling through some of these things and maybe you wrestle with like, how do we build trust in projects like this? Hopefully, this is an episode maybe you can share with the team, share with other vendors, things like that. Because I think at the end of the day, we all want things to go well. We all want to trust the other people. And it doesn't come easy. So sometimes it's having hard conversations and not leaving people in ambiguity, but really having those hard conversations. So if you enjoy this episode, feel free to pass it along, like us on social media, wherever you listen to podcasts. It's super helpful in just kind of getting the word out. So appreciate it. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, buddy. So that's relationships over transactions. And if there's one idea I want to leave you with is this one. The contract sits on the relationship, not the other way around. The contract just represents the terms. It's the relationship underneath that actually carries you through the twists and turns of a project. The second thing I keep coming back to is how trust gets built. Not in the big dramatic moments, but in the small moments. Doing what you said you do, like flying to Boston every week just to sit down in the room during a call. Little deposits into the trust account, so it's there when you need it to make a withdrawal. And the last one, partner versus vendor. When a project partner drops the ball, you don't throw them under the bus. You give them a heads up before the client ever hears about it. That's the difference between someone who transacts with and someone who picks up the phone when they really need help. If this conversation was helpful, do me a quick favor. Leave us a rating and a review wherever you're listening. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you get the podcast. It genuinely matters. Reviews are how this show reaches the next person who needs to hear it. Somebody trying to build something real with real people around them. A few words from you would help them find us. Next time, we're getting into communication and how can it make a project or quietly break the profitability, the timeline, and the joy of the whole thing. Thanks for listening. We'll see you soon.